All right, cool. Looks like we got quite a few folks. So, Mark, hey, thanks for the introduction. And again, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking the time. We're going to give you an action-packed half hour, tell you a little bit about my background. I've been in sales leadership roles. I've owned my own company. I've worked for companies like Pella, ADT, some of the larger companies, Target out there in the industry. So I'm trying to bring a wide range of different backgrounds and different ideas with my buddy Mark here to try to give you some ideas and some ways that you can learn how to have a better trade show. So we'll take it away from here, and hopefully you'll walk away with some action-packed information in the next 30 minutes. So just to kind of tell you what we're going to cover 5 actionable steps, things that you can actually use to take with you for your next trade show. We're going to show you how we actually tested it out. It's not just a bunch of noise. And then we're going to open it up for questions. So you have questions and answers, or you want to share a great idea with us, we'll be glad to let you in there and let you do that. And again, no selling. We're not going to push a product on you today. We're going to talk to you about a really cool offer if you decide down the road that you want to talk more about trade shows, but today is no selling day. So to kind of give you an idea on these 5 steps, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start with step number 1, which is start early on your actual trade show process. And the concept is we want you to build a strategy around why you're doing this trade show. What kind of a theme can you put together early? And then, ultimately, how do you book appointments? Because the most important thing that we see at a trade show is this concept of setting appointments so you're not chasing your attendees, 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road to try to book an appointment. So, when you push your sales team to create meetings and appointments at the trade show and do it early, the question is, do they remember you, and what does your booth theme look like so that they can find you simply, they remember you after the fact, and you can say things like, hey, we were those guys that had this type of a trade show.
Chad, how early do you think we should start promoting a trade show?
Mark, that's a great question. And, it starts 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time. I mean, you already have signed up for the booth, and now you're doing the plans for all the strategy of how you're going to get everything there, who your attendees, or who your folks are going to be. So 6 weeks before, you should be targeting those attendees or your existing customers and getting your sales team to set appointments with them at the show. The whole goal is to have appointments at the show, and you've got to pull your sales team together to do that. Great question. So the question then is, if you're going to try to figure out a way to stand out, what kind of themes have you guys used in the past? And maybe you could share that in the chat. And then Rachel, at the end, we'll kind of talk about some of those themes and see if anybody has a really great one that they're using. So here's the real issue with, starting early. If you set face-to-face meetings at a trade show compared to actually chasing them down 2 to 3 weeks after the show, you've got a huge cost difference in actually, finding that prospect, actually getting them to set an appointment with you after the show when they're right in front of you, and you can focus on doing that at the show. So, big booth, small idea. Here's what we're talking about here is, we see all the guys out there with the 60 by 60 booths. I mean, I was at Pack Expo, and there were some booths that were 100 by 100 foot. And, the question is, what's the theme, and how are you making an inviting booth so someone will come to your booth and actually love attending your booth time? And what I mean by that is, are you creating a fun environment? Are you actually getting active with the prospects that are walking into your booth? Kill that 6-foot table. Use some round tables. We'll talk about that in a minute, that really kind of bring people into your space. Those booths where you've got the 6-foot table and you've got the guys, gals sitting there typing on their computer. It's like, why are you at the show? I mean, the purpose of that is to invite them into your booth, have some fun, get to know them. You don't put all that stuff in the, up front with a big table with all of your either sales pieces, or you've got this machine sitting on the counter.
Chad,
it becomes a crutch. Somebody just walks up and says, hey, what's that machine for? What does that do? Oh, okay. So why does Kroger put milk in the back of the store, right? I mean, they do it so that you have to walk the entire store. Now they do it with the liquor department. I don't know how I know that, but the key is that they're making you travel through the building and then buying the staple items in the back so that you'll do something else. Same concept on your booth. Why would you put your best stuff out on the front table where they all they have to do is say, okay, great, and walk by? You got to engage them. You got to bring them in there. You got to stand out, and you got to have some fun with that. And here's an idea on your contests. When you're talking about doing contests or the old dreaded fishbowl full of business cards, we've seen all those. I mean, the only person that actually looks at those, is the person that's worried about who's going to get the free offer. We like to do things like, make a donation to a charity for the people that set appointments. We've got this children's speedway fund that we work with. Give them something they can really, feel good about instead of walking around with a whole pile of, pieces and parts and trinkets of trash, as I call it, from the show. I was thinking about this. Mark, remember that one, the show we just finished where we saw a person with a cart traveling at the show and actually going to every table and stealing all their trinkets and all their pens and pencils. It was crazy. Yeah, so standing out at the show, there's a couple ideas that we have. Hey, Rachel, can you put the table information in the chat section for them? We found these round tables. I think for less than $300, we had tables and two stools in our booth that were round. And there's a sock that you can fit over those tables that makes it. There you go. Thanks, Rachel. That makes it more inviting, more of an open feel into the booth. So, Amazon's your friend. So take a look at that as well as a place to find that. Here's what, we did at one of our shows. The sock fits right over it, so you can get this, these stand-up banners, buy the tables, get rid of the 6-footer. And I know if you're working on bigger shows and larger shows, you've got your entire booth set up and planned. We get that. What we're focusing on is training your team on how to have a better trade show and using tools like this to formulate a process to where people actually have a sales process at trade shows. I mean, we all know there's a sales process for selling, but what's the sales process for trade shows? So we're actually building this concept and idea. So when you see this next slide, you'll really understand what we're talking about. And here we go. This is about treating them like a guest. Okay, so if you invited a guest in your home and you had a party or a wedding or some event at your house and you dropped $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in there, would you allow your team to sit behind a table and sit on their laptop or sit on their phone and do their work while that event was going on? No, unfortunately, my son he'd love to just sit there on a computer and, bang away all day and not have conversations with people. So the concept is we want you to get your team to understand that this is a guest that's visiting your home. And when you work with those introverted people that have a hard time talking to strangers, this is a very simple way to make them realize that they're not focusing on the activity that they want to work on, but they're focusing on greeting a guest.
So, Chad, I grew up in the 80s, and my parents always taught me not to talk to strangers. You're saying you really should get over that and get out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, you got to bring the right team of people. Okay, there is a time and place for an engineer to talk to another engineer at the show. What I'm saying is put those folks that are comfortable talking to strangers, they don't have a problem with saying hello to someone, and put them out front in your group. And that typically is not the owner. Okay. I mean, some owners are introverted, some owners are not, but you've got to get your team out there and they've got to ask simple questions. Okay. Here's my favorite one. And Mark, you'll laugh at this because we did this at the last show. I'm at the show and we've got a booth and I waited till this one person got almost past our territory of where we were allowed to talk to them. And I turned to her and I said, "Hey, where are you from?" And she literally turned around and came into our booth and started talking to us. And it was really crazy because the question is, where are you from? They could say, I'm from Los Angeles. They could say, I work at IBM. They could say anything. They could say, no, I'm not from around here. But it's an open, simple question that is totally different. It's a pattern interrupt at the trade show. Wasn't that funny? I mean, literally, I turned to Mark and go, watch this. And I leaned out there and said it. And she did. She turned right around and came in the booth and started talking to us.
When you were at lunch, I started using that and it worked as well. So it's definitely a good opening, and it's not like you're trying to push anything on them. You're just, saying hello and asking them a question that's open-ended, and it gets them to talk to you. So it worked really well.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. And the concept is most people don't mind talking about where they're from. They're comfortable with that. And there's some folks that are walking the shows that are introverted as well. And it's amazing when you interact with them very quickly, they realize that you're being nice, you're not trying to sell them something, you just want to get to know a little bit more about them. So put your work away, focus on, what's the reason that you're at that trade show. Kill the laptops, don't have a barrier in front of them. And this is where you pull your team together and you talk about this in a team huddle before the call, before the show. Every day, the question is, how many appointments did we set today? And if you treat someone like a guest, you can convert them into an appointment, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And the idea is, okay, as we know, sales 101, you got to talk to people in order to get appointments, right? Well, the same thing goes in a trade show. If you're not engaging those folks and you don't have an environment that's friendly and it's open and people feel like you're there to listen to them, they're not going to set an appointment with you. Okay. If you've got that table out with all your paraphernalia and all your sales literature, they're not going to look at that sales literature and they're going to look at the sales literature instead of talking to you. And your team's going to share this information and show them all the cool things that your product does and never understand who the prospect is and the real reason that they're at the show. So important pieces for you guys to think about. And this whole guest culture thing, it's not something that I created. It was a concept that was created by Disney, but also leveraged at Target. And we've all been in Target. And we all know how friendly and how forward-thinking those people are at Disney as well as Target. And that is, if they're within 9 feet, make them feel fine. So the statement was, if they're in 9, make them feel fine. I can't tell you how many times I walk through a booth and no one says hello to me because either they're talking to somebody else or I just travel through the booth. And I've been in thousands of booths. You've got to acknowledge anybody that's within 9 feet of you, even if you're talking to someone else. And even if you just give them a, hey, how are you? Or just a hello as they're going through, it makes such a more wide and welcoming type atmosphere within your trade show. Okay, so let's talk about the badge scanner scenario. Okay, so you know what? I say ditch the badge scanner. Okay, and here's why I say that, and there's always a controversy over it. The badge scanner. I've been in booths where they literally hired someone to stand in the aisle and scan every single person that goes by. Okay, and then what do we do with those? We send those to our sales teams, and then our marketing department says, hey, how come you guys haven't followed up on any of the leads? Well, 3 of those leads in, I figured out that you scanned everybody there. What kind of results are we going to get out of that? So what we're pushing you to do is to think of the scanner and the badge scanner as one of the last steps in the process instead of the step in the process. I cannot tell you how many booths I've been in where I'm standing there talking to a VP or someone in the sales leadership role, and somebody walks up to me and says, "Do you mind if I scan your badge?" Right in the middle of the conversation. Okay. So, the badge scan process and the business card scan is really about getting the right types of people and then actually engaging them using a business card scanner, one that you can actually put verbal notes in. Hey, I'm here with Mark and he loves the snowmobile, and remind him, blah, 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 something about that particular prospect. That's really important to use. We have a tool that we can talk to you later about that. But the key is now you're taking notes and you're tracking the actual results. So we're going to convert a prospect or attendee into a guest into our home, and then we're going to make sure that guest answers a group of questions about why they're there. And then we're going to use a badge scanner or a business card to capture their information. And, it's important when we start to look at that, you're taking notes that relate to that product. I mean, how many times have you seen a business card with the notes on the back and you can't even read it? It's crazy. Or you've got this big list, this laundry list from the trade show in Excel format that you've got to now upload into your CRM. That stuff should be automated. You should make sure that happens automatically while you're live and at the show.
Did
I leave anything out, Mark?
We walked by a booth that had nothing to do. We were not a prospect for them, but they scanned my badge. They didn't ask me any questions. And I think I got back on Monday morning and I get a phone call from the local sales rep in the Cleveland area. And he says, so what can I do for you? And he had no idea of who I was, didn't know anything about my company, had no way to qualify if I was really a good lead or not. But he probably spent 5 minutes finding my information, calling me up. And it was just a waste of his time because someone scanned the badge at his booth that he wasn't even at the show. but he, had to call these leads. So imagine he probably got a dozen or more leads like that he had to follow up with, who were not good prospects because he didn't have a good way to qualify those leads at the show.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great example. And I think what's important there is if you're train your team and you have that team huddle before the show and you turn to your team and say, we're not scanning every single person. We're going to scan people that we set appointments with. And you teach your team these simple steps. When they walk by the booth, make them feel fine within 9. Okay? Engage them with a simple question like, where are you from? Invite them into your booth. And then ultimately, what are you trying to do? Set an appointment. So if you've set appointments before the show and you set appointments while you're at the show for next week, let's talk about setting appointments at the actual show itself. Here's another one. These crazy pet peeves that I have. I walk in a booth and I look for Mark and I say to somebody, hey, do you know where Mark is? And they're like, oh, let me look. And they run around the booth because it's too big. You can't see all the way around it. And they come back up to you and they say, you know what? Mark must have stepped away for some reason. Do you mind coming back in about a half hour? He'll be back. Okay, well, I'm standing at PAC Expo at the Las Vegas Convention Center, and I'm watching this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, is he going to even find this booth? I mean, how many square feet is the PAC Expo, right? Huge, humongous. Not only that, but what kind of message does it say if you invite somebody into your booth or into your home and say, hey, I know we're supposed to be here, but I decided to leave, and I'm not going to tell anybody where I'm going. And if you get time, come back in a half an hour. Right. Now they're chasing you. Okay, so guess what? You come back in a half an hour, and I walk over. I see Mark, and guess what? If he's doing his job, he's talking to somebody. And he's talking to somebody for 10 minutes. So after about 3 minutes of standing off to the side because I don't want to interrupt, what do? You walk away. Okay, so here's this great prospect. They knew your name. They came to find you, and you're too busy to talk to them. And you didn't even know they were there because nobody gathered any information. So here's what we want you to do different. Use an appointment setter. We use one that's called Calendly, and set an appointment for Mark at the show. So here's what it sounds like. Hey, Mark, you know what? I'm looking at Mark. Hey, Michael, I'm looking at Mark's calendar, and it says that he had a meeting from 12 to 12:15. Yet, here we go. Why don't we just set up a 15-minute call at the show today? You can come back, and I'll make sure Mark is here. So using that type of a technique with your team so that everybody can see Mark's calendar and everyone has an insight of where Mark is, guess what? You're setting real live appointments at the show, and guess what that prospect thinks? You cared about them. You looked them up. They get a notification that says Mark's back in the booth in 5 minutes. Make sure you come back. And you've now worked yourself in the schedule. And they may say, hey, I'm leaving today, but I'll be back tomorrow. Okay, great. Let's set that one up for 9 o'clock as our first appointment. We'll let you in a little bit early so we can have this call. So really important. That's a big issue. I see it all the time. Set appointments at the show and teach your team how to do that. Did I miss anything else, Mark? Okay, cool. And then I hear this a lot from our marketing teams. I hate that list, that Excel list that I have to scrub. Well, everybody else is at the bar or having the 5 o'clock party. I'm either sitting at a desk somewhere typing in business cards, or I'm getting that the dreaded list from the trade show. Well, when do I get the list? I don't get it every day. I get it at the end of the show. So I want to get that list every single day. So you got to use a tool that allows you to capture that information so you have it daily. That tells you how much traffic you had in your booth. It also tells you what appointments your team has set, and you can set a goal for the next day. Hey, we set 25 appointments today. Our goal is to set 25 tomorrow. And the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about on this when we start talking about this whole badge scanning situation is, marketing teams, if you kind of just some techie information here is believe that they don't really convert very well. There's a lot of information in there. Well, now we know why, because we're scanning everybody that's at the show and using it at the badge scanner. Okay. So somebody had a question about, okay, what was that question, Rachel? You're stuck using, do 30 shows or something? Where's that comment, Rachel? Oh, there it is. Hey, our company's based out of Vegas. We do 30 trade shows a year. How realistic would it be for us to stop using the badge scanner? Okay, well, here's the situation. For every one of those shows, the show team is going to get the trade show company is going to get their money one way or the other. Either one, you got to rent a scanner And we've all seen that. Who's got the scanner? Because you didn't want to rent 5 of them, so you've got one floating around. Everybody's looking for it. Number 2, you rent or buy the app. So now you've got to teach 9 people how to use an app. And if you've got 30 shows, you have 30 apps potentially that you have to train your team how to use it. And then, Mark, we were at a show. We both have Pixel 3s,
yeah, my Android
right?
phone, we installed the app at the show and it wouldn't load. And they said, oh, you have the new phone, the new Android phone. Well, it doesn't work on the new Android. You got to have the old Android. So we had spent the money on the badge scanner and we couldn't even use it. It was really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, so now you've got all these different phone versions that you've got to make sure your team knows how to use. You get to the show, you're marketing, they haven't loaded the app, they can't find the app, I mean, blah, blah, blah. And then they've got to go through, 30 times and upload that. So here's what you can do. There's an API typically on these shows that you can purchase from the trade show company that we and others integrate with. So then you're just using a single app through the whole year, which will make it very easy. Because think about it, if you have 30 trade shows a year, as this person says, you've got 60 people that you have to train on how to use either the scanner or you have to teach them how to use the app. So we want you using the same thing all year round, make it simple, make it easy for you to be able to do that. So scheduling appointments, we talked about this going beyond that. I think we hit that pretty hard. We recommend that you have a set of qualifying questions that you ask at a trade show. I mean, you've got to get everyone to ask the same questions. Here's the reason why. You have a marketing person, a salesperson, and an engineer in your booth. They all have 3 different worlds, 3 different skill sets, and they're going to be like, well, I'm going to ask about the product, and I'm going to ask about this, and I'm going to ask that. So when you pull your team together and you say, we're all going to ask these 4 very important questions, what should they be? It's a real good exercise to do because you're going to hear all these different things that they feel is really important. And you, on the other hand, as a leader, are going to say, well, I really need to know these answers to these questions so we can decide if this is a prospect. So if you're selling a product or service, and, for example, let's say you want to know you're selling a CRM system. Wouldn't you like to know what CRM they currently are using? Or if they're not? I mean, that's a big question. So in that scenario, that should be the same question that everyone's asking those prospects so that you can capture those information and then use a tool that will push that information to the salesperson. So like Mark's example, instead of calling out of the blue, you're calling and saying, hey, I see you use XYZ CRM. And, you've had it for the last 60 days and you have 30 salespeople. So just important information that you build those questionnaires, which will help you with the follow-up on the leads from scheduling those appointments. So, it's talk is great, but, let's actually walk the talk. So this is a picture of a trade show booth that we put together it was a B2B conference in Los Angeles. There were lots of exhibitors there, and we picked a race car theme. If you can't really see that really well, but we ordered these racing shirts. I mean, what did those shirts cost? It's like $60, I think. Yeah, we ordered these racing shirts so we look like a crew chief leader there on the show. And then ultimately, we set 25 appointments in one day at this particular show. And it was crazy because we're using this calendar function and we've identified that there are definitely a prospect. And we said, hey, what's your schedule look like for next week? They pull out their phone, they look at their schedule and they say, how about Tuesday? We're like, great. We click on the calendar on our phone, on the iPad and say, how about 2 o'clock? They're like, perfect. They'll literally walked over there and entered their information into the iPad, name, information, just simple, email address and phone number. And boom, they actually scheduled the appointment for themselves. And when they do that, 3 out of 4 of those appointments, 75%, will keep that actual appointment versus you trying to chase them down next week and try to set up a time for them to talk. So real important factor, a way of setting it up. We've tested it time and time again. This is a real life scenario. And as you can see, we've got these racing and crew shirts on. That was funny. Actually, somebody came up to us and said, because they were at the conference 2 days in a row, and they said, hey, you guys had red shirts on yesterday and now you got blue shirts on. So, when we call someone and go, hey, this is the racing theme, this is what they say. So, talk the talk, it works. It's proven in the process. So kind of, the clear takeaways from this is make sure you start early. Make sure you have a really big ID at your booth. Treat them like a guest. Focus on setting appointments and not the badge scanner, and schedule while you're on the spot. So I think we've got time for questions. I want to make sure we have time. Looks like we've got a few minutes here. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask us? Or even a comment would be cool. Mandy says she loves the charity donation idea. Yeah, you know what's cool about that, Mandy, is we have clients who are not allowed to accept gifts. So in that scenario, what we do is we send them a letter afterwards saying, hey, we made a donation to this charity, and we send them a letter so they can put it on their board, at their home office. Somebody else says, I use Calendly for everything we should, every show we do. Awesome. Great idea. It works. It's awesome. We actually have some that set it up for conferences, actual conference rooms, and we have others that set it up for the VIPs. So love the idea of getting rid of the badge scanner, but I've yet to see a good alternative. Are there other resources besides Calendly? Yeah, that's something. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Mark, I think what we should do is here's what we'll do for you if you're interested in learning more about what we do. We'll set an appointment with you. We'll make that same donation of $25 to the Children's Speedway Fund, and we'll set up your next trade show for you for free, so that you can use Mobile Locker alongside of whatever else you're using. You'll be able to use Mobile Locker. How's that for a good deal? Free first show. All you have to do is set up a time with us and talk. Okay, so question is, if we've ditched the badge scanner, what's the best way we can get the contact information? You know what? Corey will talk about a simple process of scanning the business card or badge and then capturing that information. And it works in companies like ours and Mobile Locker. So we should probably set up a time and talk. Let's see. Rachel, okay, we've got that one. Okay, so Rachel just put the link in there for 15 minutes. If you want to set up a call with us, I mean, here we are telling you to do it. We might as well do the same thing. And so in 15 minutes, we can decide what you're doing, if it's working. If you just want to pick our brains for ideas for the show, we'll do that as well. And then if it makes more sense and you want to learn more about what we do, we'll be happy to do that. And we'll do your next trade show for you for free. So you get to use Mobile Locker.
Yes, Judy or Judith will in 2 hours.
Okay, we're at 29 minutes and 5 seconds. Anybody got a last minute question? Because I'm going to finish this on time. Any last ones? Going?
Thank you, everybody.
Cool. My forecast for the next trade show? Oh, yeah. If you don't use a scanner, you'll really love us. And you'll love to hear what we do to help you with the scanners. Somebody's talking about chain motel housekeeping assessment online, I think is what that says. Yeah, so we can actually talk to you about how to build those questionnaires. So you're asking the right types of questions. And whether you're at a show, a conference, we don't either way, we can make it work. So if you click on that link, we'll be happy to share this with you and set up a time. And I appreciate everyone's attention today. Have a great rest of your day, and stay focused on setting appointments at your next trade show. See ya.